Now we come to another star who has become a household word, Dato' Ambiga. They say, and as an older man, maybe I got the license, that she's young, obviously younger than me, very bright, obviously brighter than me, and charming, and yet highly pertinent, particularly to our times today. I have great pleasure in now inviting her to address us. Dato' Ambiga.
Thank you very much, Tansri and Dato' Wan Ahmad. Let me first start by responding very briefly to Dato' Wan's comment. And of course, he was in the hot seat on Tuesday. I don't deny that. But the reactions of the audience, I think there have been criticism about them. But my own view is when, as leaders, I mean, I don't consider myself a leader, but as leaders or persons in charge of organizations, if people are angry, you have to respond to them. The answer is not to shut them out and to talk down to them. You need to understand their anger. And I think a lot of the questions that day, with due respect, were very fair questions. They were questions about indelible ink, they were questions about the role, etc., etc. People may have been a little bit emotional. But I think it is important for leaders in this country to understand the anger of the people and to understand why people are angry. And a lot of it is actually because they're not getting answers. And I think Dato' Wan has explained his constraints. And that is very annoying to the people because they're not getting any clarity, any clear answers to the questions that they have. Having said that, and in fact, one of the participants, or a couple of them, were quite rude when they asked me a question. But I understood, rather than shut them out, I said it was important for people who have a grievance, for them to have a response. And I think that's the way forward for me. Now, as far as Bersih 2 is concerned, Dato' Shafi had it. As far as Bersih 2 is concerned, I'd like to say that we are not the first to ask for electoral reform. People have been asking for electoral reform in this country for the longest time, for the last 20 years. In fact, if you look at academics, there's a book actually by Mavis Puducherry and Noraini Osman, which contains, it's an excellent book. 2005 this came out, and it has several articles by very distinguished people as to reasons why there should be changes to the electoral system. So really, the problem with the reforms, and let me tell you, since the 1970s there have been a lot of reforms, there have been a lot of amendments to the law. And certainly after the 1999 elections, I can tell you there were 32 amendments to the election laws. So, and by the way, there was also an amendment to the Constitution, if you recall, to extend the retirement age of the chairperson of the Election Commission. This was in either 2007 or 2008. So, reform of election laws is nothing new, and it has been taking place. The problem is that the election laws have been amended, possibly not necessarily to make the to make the playground more even, and that is really one of the complaints. That the amendments actually, if you notice, for example, after one of the cases, the Likas 2 case, in fact, from Sabah, there was an amendment which said you couldn't challenge the electoral roll. That amendment came about in 2002 because one of the grounds in that case was that there was a problem with the election rolls. So the amendments just keep seeming to take away from the level playing field, or rather making it more uneven, as it were. So we are not the first to ask for electoral reform. The reforms that we have asked for are not new. They are not new. These are problems that have existed in the past. Now I'm going to run through very quickly. Doesn't work. All right. If you just look at the slide, what we are asking for, if you, these are the figures. There are 3.7, and counting, by the way, unregistered voters as at today. Now, when I say unregistered, it is possible that they have actually gone to the post office or wherever it is and filled up the forms, but they have not got onto the electoral roll. Now, the problem is there is a lag period between going and filling in your form and getting onto the electoral roll. That is a problem. And we have, there is a backlog, and perhaps that is something Dr. Wan can address later in response. I understand there's a process, yes, but it cannot be more than, it cannot take more than a couple of months to get through that process. Now, we have 12 million registered voters. One of our first tasks is in relation to phantom voters and other fraud, as well as disenfranchisement by virtue of impersonation, illegal transfers, and other things. So those are some of the things. Phantom voters, you know what phantom voters are. Impersonators of the dead, impersonators of legitimate voters, non-resident voters, and multiple registered or fraudulently registered voters. Now, I will come to showing you some evidence of that shortly, but one of the issues is, why is it that deceased persons cannot be removed from the electoral roll? This is an issue that Per se is quite concerned with, because it's tied up with the NRD. It's not necessarily the EC's a problem that is EC's, it is a problem with the NRD. And what they say is, what EC has suggested in their responses is that those who have lost relatives should go and remove their names from the NRD. Now, I'm not clear on why that is necessary, because in this country, you can't, it is very appalling to me that a national registration system cannot detect whether a person is dead or alive. And we know that there are many cases of people who are on the register, on the roll, who are more than 100 years and so on. So how is that happening? Now, if it is a problem with the NRD, then it has to be sorted out, which is why I also have misgivings about the biometric system, although I'm open to hearing about this. The biometric system, if it is going to be tied up with the NRD database, then we have a problem, because the NRD database doesn't seem to be able to capture, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, and perhaps someone from NRD should also be here to respond, to be fair to them. Why is it they're not able to capture people who have passed on? I find it difficult, because you need a death certificate, you need a burial certificate. You cannot proceed to bury and to carry out last rites without all the necessary records. So explain to me why the NRD cannot capture that information. I don't understand it. You can capture births, but you can't capture deaths. I find that difficult to believe. So the other thing is, okay, this is an example, all right? There are two people, you look at the names, Lanuddin and Lanuddin, you see that there. The same IC numbers, registered in two different parliament constituencies and state constituencies. All right? Then the second one is the same person, Parvati, slight variation, and then you have them registered in two places. This is only one of many, many examples. We've got a whole list. We've got a whole book, actually, of examples of such registrations. Now, what we have, this is another example where you have the husband on the left-hand side, Ong Ah Hock, who is registered in one constituency, and then the wife and the in-laws registered in another, all in one household. Okay, so that's another example. Now, these are other things that we have found. The last bullet there, the tie between voters and constituencies can only be changed by voters or the parliament. Now, what that means is this: you can't move a voter, and I think Dr. Wan has said this in their booklet, you can't move a voter unless they apply, and you cannot shift. You see what happened, if you recall, there was a case in Hulu, Selangor, of, I think it was 282 or 272, who were moved, voters who were moved by the Election Commission, and they have regulations that apparently allow them to do that. Now, to me, that was like a redelineation. You have actually shifted the boundary by doing that. And how does that tie in with the sanctity of the electoral roll? Because the electoral roll cannot be touched, in a sense, and I think the EC does acknowledge that. But they admitted making these transfers, and we were concerned as to how that happened. But apparently there is a regulation that allows it. Now, in our view, that regulation cannot be correct. It is actually ultra vires the act, because the electoral roll, once it is entered, is sacrosanct. So in fact, when we ask for cleaning of the electoral roll, we do acknowledge that you may need some statutory amendments, some amendments to the legislation to empower the EC to clean up some of these issues. And that is something we should be looking at. Now, the other thing is, we have suggested, per se, that we have automatic voter registration.